Maggie. Maggie's a tough one. She's my gooey girl who she's the heroine of Conversations with the Fat Girl. Conversations with the Fat Girl is also written in first person present, as were all of my books up until Family Reservations, which is close third. So there's a definite divide. Um, I love Maggie, but also she is a time capsule of my 20s. And there is that part of you which was you're just like she behaves like a 20-year-old, she thinks like a 20-year-old, and for me it's so raw and so vulnerable that it's hard to access her again during certain times because she is such a clean time capsule of that time. Because I'd never been to college and I only knew writing as a 5-year-old, when I started Conversations it was a short story. Nowhere in my brain did I think I could write a novel. It was a short story called One Small Dog, where the opening of the story is all about a dog, a big dog, and that was she was very much my dog. Where I was like, no, she's 25 pounds. She looked like a giant dingo. There was no way she was 25 pounds. And so I kind of wrote about that, and I wrote my way into, and it kept going and it kept going, and how my process at that time. I say it in giant air quotes because of back in the day, O Magazine used to come out, and they used to have like a calendar in the front. And so I tore the calendar out of the O Magazine. It's probably my mom's Oprah Magazine, and I put it on the fridge. And all I had to do, because I'm a very linear gold star person, um, I had to mark off. It didn't matter how much, just one page, one word, whatever, but it had to be 30 days of writing. And I just would mark it off. And it would drive me crazy if there was a little X there, a blank box. So that's how I wrote Conversations. It was the worst first draft ever, 900 pages, terrible, legitimately terrible. And I did a book club of all of, I didn't have any friends at the time, obviously, but my mom did. So she doesn't anymore, because after this little book club I had with all this 900-page terribleness, we had like a meeting, and it was like all this kind of stuff. And everybody was like, and here are your notes and see you never. So that's how I did Conversations. And then we kind of, as it is with publication, yes, I had a product, but also I hit right at the tail end of Chicklet. I hit when they were trying to build a Chicklet, kind of a smart Chicklet line. So it was also being ready, but also the luck of having that kind of both sides thing. The difference between the writing of 9 and 8, Family Reservations to Nobody's, I can track it to basically the master's program that I learned at BuzzFeed. I was listening to this woman talk about how one of the things that she thinks that does artists dirty is that, and she was speaking specifically around acting, where she was like, you can tell the difference between an actor who is in rehearsal process and an actor who is just performing for the stage. And I think when you are a writer that has to put food on the table from writing, you start looking at it. You start looking at writing in a very, very different way. It's you have to put food on the table, so it becomes this kind of job, and you lose. I did, at least, and I'll speak from I lost that original 5-year-old writing, the Tales of Animal Land, because I had to put food on the table. There was also a kind of a come to Jesus that I had to have about, like, even kind of thinking that writing was the thing that made me important. Writing is the thing that was going to make the cool kids like me. It was a very external goal of why I wrote. And I think because of this rehearsal that I had to have at BuzzFeed, where I had to learn how to learn. I had to be bad at stuff. I had to have a very public, deep learning curve. And that is where I really learned structure, because that's what I did. I was a creative executive and a supervising writer at BuzzFeed. So I would take basically a viral video and blow it out over 10 episodes. And how you do that is by knowing what the structures are and what beats you have to hit and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of repetition day in and day out and day in and day out of giving notes, because that's the other thing that I didn't really know how to do, which is also something that you have to learn by doing painfully, is how to execute notes. I think a lot of people give notes to people, especially new writers, and they think that they're just not taking the notes because they're like being not doing it. What I learned at BuzzFeed is there is a percentage of people that don't take notes because they honestly don't know how. Because executing a note is incredibly hard. Knowing something is wrong with something is one skill. Knowing how to fix it is a very, very different skill that comes from doing it repetitively. And I learned that at BuzzFeed. When that you can tell because I learned how to revise better in nine. I think you can finally see in this story that it's not necessarily, it is more of a bird's eye. It is bigger than the other books, even in how they're told. And originally when I sent this to my agent, it was just Athena, and she blew it out to four. Like it was only going to be Athena, the Cordelia character avatar. For me, I got blocked back in 2017. I was coming up with terrible, terrible pitches. They were basically, please like me. Is this the trend? Every writer's been there. Is this the trend? Here's a pitch. Do you want this meets this meets this, all that kind of stuff. And I had gotten so shallow with my pitches because I didn't know why I wrote. And so finally no one wanted what I was selling, quite rightly. They were bad pitches. So all I had was my day job now, because all the pitches that I didn't sell, everything wasn't selling, all that kind of stuff. So I went fully into BuzzFeed, which was such a blessing in disguise because that's where I learned everything, right? But in October 2020, we were at home. I no longer had my commute. And there's a Surrey International Writers Conference. It's up in Vancouver. And for the first time, I could actually go to it because it was virtual. And so I actually got to take classes. And once again, I learned how to learn from BuzzFeed. And so I went there and I actually went to all these different workshops at this thing, even though I was giving my own. And finally, it was there. I was in one of these workshops and I wrote on the journal Succession in a Restaurant. I finally got it because BuzzFeed had also taught me about thinking about audience. And I knew that I wanted my book to be passed between two women to empower them to kind of step off of the path that they've been told to follow, or that they're a good little girl should follow. I wanted them to empower them to follow their own path, but also let them know that is hard. It is not a montage. It is not a movie montage. It's inspirational only in hindsight. It's hard as shit. I had been doing it for 8 years. And so Family Reservations came out of writer's block, cancer surgeries, day job headaches, and me learning how to learn again so that I could write the bigger book. And it was patient with me. So I excavated the story over years and years until I finally got it. In 2021 was when I started writing it, but I started breaking it in 2017. I think as I've done this now 20 years, I know where my strengths are. I know I write good dialogue. But I also know that any strength can also be a weakness if you use it too much. So I know that I have to kind of pull back my dialogue. And for me, I think the key to this book is simply I wrote slow. And I know that is a cop-out, but I wrote slow. I wrote every morning from 5:30 to 8:30 in the morning before work. Sometimes I would get 8 words. Sometimes I would get negative words, which feels cruel because I've been editing. Sometimes I would get 137 or whatever it is. But it was so slow that I was able to your point, to manage all the voices and manage all the threads because I wasn't on the freeway. I was on the little side street. So I was able to see the cute new restaurant and that one house being renovated and that kind of thing. And I was able to listen, which I think is one of the biggest things. Is I think as writers, we want to sit there and we want to tell the story, what it's about. But the best thing you can actually do is just get quiet, take it slow, and listen, because they will start talking to you. And I know that sounds nuts, but every writer has experienced it. And how you experience it is when you finish your first draft and then you go back to the beginning. Every writer will say, they don't talk like that. They don't sound like that for the dialogue you wrote in the beginning. So you do know what they sound like. So I think because I had these golden mornings, and by the way, I wasn't like, yay, 5:30, but those mornings became my golden mornings because the day job was bringing me down and the health stuff and all that kind of stuff. Those 3 hours were the only hours that felt free to me. It's emotional. I feel emotional.
We can wait a second.
No, it's so like I hate when I'm like, yeah, it's emotional. It was really.
It's okay.
Hard.
No, it's a real moment. Yeah. I don't want to take it from you. Have it.
Yeah.
Have it.
Yeah. But I think it was that. I think it was going so slow, having that specific time where I would come to my desk every morning. I have the same playlist. I had the same cup of tea. I use my Pomodoro method. I swear by it. 25 minutes writing, 5 minutes off. I had the timer going. I knew that the setup was exactly the same because I know every writer out there will resonate with this. It's like, it's not the writing that hard, it's the runway to the writing. It's sinking down so it can be quiet enough in your brain to write. And so by having the same situation, 5:30 to 8:30 every morning, because I didn't have the commute anymore, that's where that time opened up. So it's like now I can do it. And the the writing got easier as that habit got more and more ingrained in my life. And that's the only way that I could have written such a big book because it was always beyond my fingertips, which it should be. Like book 10 for me that I'm writing right now is beyond my fingertips. It's scary to me. There's parts of it that I'm not sure I can do yet. But that's the exciting part because 9 was always beyond my fingers. It was always beyond my fingers. And so I had to go slow because the threat level of it running off without me was daily.